The Indiana Fever just made a move that broke the internet, and not in the way the fan base was hoping for. Myisha Hines-Allen is officially headed to Indianapolis, and, depending on who you ask, this is either a calculated chess move by a front office playing the long game, or proof that Indiana is building a bargain bin roster around the most valuable player in women's basketball. The reaction online was instant, it was loud, and it was divided straight down the middle. But here's what most people aren't telling you. This signing isn't just about one player. It's about cap math, championship windows, a massive hole left by a dominant defender, and a front office philosophy that's either brilliantly patient or dangerously cautious. Before you make up your mind, you need the full picture, because the surface-level take doesn't do this story justice. There's a reason Fever fans went from excitement to frustration within 20 minutes of that Instagram post dropping. There's a reason the comment sections exploded the way they did. And once you understand everything happening behind the scenes, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Starts to make complete sense. Let's break it all down. It started the way most big WNBA news breaks these days, not with a press release, but with a player's Instagram story. Before the Indiana Fever officially announced anything, Myisha Hines-Allen was already online. Red and gold imagery. Cryptic captions. Just enough to let anyone paying close attention connect the dots, a full 20 minutes before the front office made it official. And the moment that announcement dropped, the comment sections absolutely detonated. The divide was instant. On one side, fans genuinely excited about a veteran presence joining a young roster with championship ambitions. On the other side, a much louder group who had already pulled up the analytics, run the comparisons, and arrived at a very different conclusion. The frustration wasn't random, it was specific, it was data-driven, and it pointed to something far bigger than one free agent signing. It pointed to a front office philosophy, and whether that philosophy is going to be enough to take this franchise where everyone believes it belongs. Because the Fever aren't a rebuilding team. They aren't in development mode. They have the most marketable player in women's basketball. Sold-out arenas across the country, national television deals that didn't exist 3 years ago, and a fan base that is deeply, genuinely invested in what comes next. Every roster decision gets examined under a microscope, and this one arrived with more scrutiny than most. What made the reaction even more intense was the timing. Free agency in the new CBA era has created massive movement across the league, with players chasing money, opportunity, and contending rosters all at once. The Fever were expected to be aggressive buyers in that market. They had the profile of a destination team. Clark's gravity alone makes Indiana attractive to any player who wants to win. So when the first major signing turned out to be Hines-Allen rather than the headline-grabbing addition fans were expecting, the disappointment hit hard and fast. But reacting in the first 20 minutes of an announcement is rarely the full story. The context behind this move, the cap constraints, the losses elsewhere, the draft strategy running parallel to free agency paints a much more complicated picture. And understanding that picture is the only way to have an honest conversation about whether Indiana made the right call or left real opportunity on the table. People are quick to form opinions on players they've never actually watched, and in this case, the quick takes are leaving out some genuinely important context. Myisha Hines-Allen was selected by the Washington Mystics with the No. 19 pick in the 2018 WNBA draft. And from her very first season, she was never positioned as a star. She was a role player, physical, relentless, competitive. The kind of player who doesn't light up the highlights but absolutely shows up when the game is on the line. She spent 7 full seasons with Washington, and in 2019, she was part of a Mystics squad that won the WNBA Championship. That ring isn't a footnote, it's proof that she understands what winning basketball looks like from the inside out. She's been in high-pressure locker rooms. She's competed when titles were on the table. That experience lives in her game in ways that don't always register in a box score, but absolutely register on the court when October basketball is being played. Her peak individual season came in 2020, when she averaged 17 points and 8.9 rebounds per game in a shortened campaign. Those numbers showed that at her ceiling, she can be a genuine force at the four-position scoring in the post, crashing the glass and demanding defensive attention. The version that arrived in Dallas last season was a more limited player, averaging 7.6 points and 6 rebounds across 40 games on 45% shooting. But she was consistent, healthy, and available every single night. In free agency, Hines-Allen was direct about what drove her decision. Playing for a contending team was the priority, and Indiana checked every box on her list. That's not a player chasing a payday, it's a player chasing a ring. There's a meaningful difference between those two motivations, and it matters when you're building a locker room culture. On the court, her role with Indiana likely won't require heavy scoring. What the Fever need from her is physicality in the paint, defensive presence, rebounding, and the kind of veteran toughness that protects Caitlin Clark when opposing teams get physical. The moment she steps up for Clark one time, and she will, the fan base's opinion shifts immediately. Championship-winning instincts have a way of showing up exactly when you need them most. No amount of positive spin changes what losing Natasha Howard actually means for this roster. As free agency opened, Howard made her decision quickly and clearly agreeing to a 2-year, $1.4 million deal with the Minnesota Lynx. She's not coming back. That chapter is completely closed, and the void she's left behind is as real as it gets. The numbers she posted in her one season with Indiana were genuinely remarkable. In 44 games, Howard averaged 11.4 points, 6.6 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and 1.2 steals per contest, while shooting 55.2% from the field. Over 55% from the field. For context, that's elite finishing efficiency, the kind of number that means every time Howard touched the ball in a productive position, she almost always made the defense pay. Her defensive impact was equally impressive. She protected the rim. She switched onto guards without getting exposed. She gave Indiana a legitimate two-way anchor at the 4 position. A 2-time WNBA All-Star and former Defensive Player of the Year, Howard won her first championship with the Lynx back in 2017, then captured 2 more titles with the Seattle Storm in 2018 and 2020. 3 rings, a Defensive Player of the Year award, multiple All-Star selections. She arrived in Indiana with a resume built for exactly the kind of pressure environment the Fever are trying to create, and for one season, she delivered on every bit of it. The reason she wasn't retained comes down to a cap choice. Indiana decided to bring back Sophie Cunningham, and fitting both players into the available space wasn't possible under the new CBA structure. That's not a failure of effort, it's the brutal reality of operating under a hard cap when multiple contracts all come due at once. You choose your priorities and you live with the consequences. Howard's return to Minnesota, where it all started for her in 2017, is a full-circle moment that makes sense for everyone involved. For the Fever, it means finding answers at a position where they just lost one of the best defenders in the league. Hines-Allen steps into that role carrying a completely different skill profile. More physical presence, less elite defensive reliability. Whether coaching and system can close that gap is the defining question hanging over Indiana's entire 2026 season. The new collective bargaining agreement didn't just raise salaries, it completely rewired the math of building a WNBA roster. And the Fever are feeling that rewiring harder than almost anyone else in the league. The salary cap moved up to $7 million for 2026, which sounds like breathing room until you start plugging in real numbers and watch that space evaporate almost immediately. Start with Caitlin Clark. Under the new CBA, her salary jumps from $78,000 in 2025 to approximately $530,000 in 2026. That's still below market for the most impactful player in women's basketball by a significant margin, but It's now a real cap number. Kelsey Mitchell signed the one-year, $1.4 million supermax, making her the first Fever player to crack the $1 million threshold. Then factor in Aaliyah Boston, who under the new Epic provision is now max eligible at approximately $1.19 million heading into 2026. Those three players alone are consuming a massive portion of Indiana's total cap space before a single role player gets signed. By the time you layer in Lexie Hull's contract, Sophie Cunningham's deal, and the new minimum salary thresholds, which now start around $270,000 for rookies and $300,000 for veterans, the remaining money gets divided among players in a range where star-level talent simply isn't available. The Fever are allocating roughly $400,000 per remaining roster spot after the core is paid. That's not a number that attracts difference makers in free agency. Some fans have pointed specifically at the Mitchell Supermax as the critical constraint. Other elite players around the league negotiated team-friendly deals in the early years of the new CBA, accepting slightly less in year one to give their franchises financial flexibility to build better rosters. Mitchell took every dollar she was entitled to, which is her absolute right, but the downstream effect is real. That difference in cap hit cascades across every remaining roster decision the front office makes. This isn't about pointing fingers at any individual player. It's about understanding why Indiana finds itself choosing between veterans on minimum deals rather than chasing impact players on the open market. The cap math is unforgiving. The new CBA made it harder across the board, and the Fever are navigating constraints that were always going to produce some version of this outcome. Credit where it's due, there are legitimate reasons to feel optimistic about this signing, and they go beyond just fitting the budget. Hines-Allen brings 240 career games of WNBA experience to a roster that still has significant youth at key positions. That experience isn't abstract. It shows up in moments. It shows up when a young player is about to make a mental error and a veteran grabs her by the arm and redirects her before the damage is done. It shows up in timeout huddles when the stakes are high and someone needs to say the right thing. Indiana Fever GM Amber Cox addressed it directly. She brings championship experience that will impact us on the court and in the locker room. Read that locker room part carefully. That's deliberate language about culture, not just production. On the floor, Hines-Allen played all 40 games in Dallas last season, including 20 starts, and averaged 7.6 points, 6 rebounds, and 2.9 assists in 22 minutes per game while shooting 45% from the field. She was healthy, she was consistent, and she handled starter minutes without falling apart under pressure. Those are baseline qualities that matter more than they sometimes get credit for in a league where availability is its own form of value. The genuine concerns, though, are worth taking seriously. A multi-season negative net rating isn't a fluke, it's a pattern. Negative net ratings over consecutive seasons point to specific recurring issues: defensive rotation breakdowns, getting targeted in pick-and-roll coverage, losing assignments in transition. Those aren't problems that automatically resolve themselves when the zip code changes. They're scheme and instinct problems that require real coaching investment to correct. Her offensive limitations are also real. She's not a floor spacer at a level that consistently opens driving lanes. She's not a post creator who can punish mismatches independently. She needs to be positioned correctly to be effective, which places extra responsibility on the coaching staff to get her into spots where she can succeed. The optimistic counter, playing alongside Caitlin Clark, elevates everyone around her. Players who've never been efficient suddenly look different when Clark is drawing 2 defenders and finding the open man in rhythm. If that gravity creates easier opportunities for Hines-Allen than she's ever had before, the net rating trend could reverse itself completely. That's not guaranteed, but it's not unreasonable either. While the Hines-Allen conversation was dominating every timeline, Indiana was making additional moves that complete the picture of what this 2026 roster is actually going to look like, and not all of it is cause for concern. On the loss side, the Fever watched both Brianna Turner and Shea Petty walk in free agency. Turner signed with the Las Vegas Aces, Petty landed with the Connecticut Sun, and both departures hurt in different ways. Turner specifically provided defensive versatility in the front court that the Fever will now need to replace through other means. Losing two rotation players simultaneously on the same day you're announcing one addition means the roster math still has some uncomfortable gaps that need to be filled. That's where the 2026 WNBA draft becomes critical context. Indiana used the 10th overall pick on Raven Johnson, and the early analysis on that selection has been consistently enthusiastic. Johnson is the kind of player coaches love: defensive intensity, switchable on multiple positions, physical enough to compete against veterans despite rookie status. Her skill set complements Clark and Mitchell in specific ways. She doesn't need the ball to impact winning, she makes smart decisions under pressure, and her length creates problems for opposing ball handlers. Those qualities are exactly what you want from a player entering on a rookie-scale contract. Meanwhile, the Monique Billings addition deserves far more attention than it's receiving. Billings spent time playing alongside Caitlin Clark during Team USA training, which means the chemistry already exists. The timing, the trust, the communication that typically takes an entire training camp to build. On the court, she shot 81% at the rim last season. That number is almost absurd. A screener and finisher operating at that efficiency in pick-and-roll action with Clark distributing, opposing defenses are going to have serious problems containing that combination. Sophie Cunningham is back as well, fully recovered from the MCL tear that cut her 2025 season short. Her competition with Lexie Hull for starting minutes should push both players to perform at a higher level, exactly what a coaching staff wants when building genuine depth at wing. Hull's return was confirmed on April 11th, in a moment that told you everything you needed to know about the chemistry inside this locker room. The roster is taking shape. The question now is whether the shape is sharp enough. Here's the tension that's actually driving all of this, and it's worth naming directly rather than dancing around it. The Indiana Fever are caught between two competing philosophies, and the Myisha Hines-Allen signing is a direct symptom of that tension playing out in real time. The first philosophy says, you have Caitlin Clark under contract through 2027 at a number that represents extraordinary value for a player of her caliber. This is the window. You spend aggressively right now. You absorb cap risk. You go get players who can win immediately, because once Clark hits free agency and can command max money, the math becomes dramatically harder to manage. Every season you spend being cautious is a season you never get back. The second philosophy says, the new CBA has fundamentally changed contract values across the board. Boston is now max eligible at over $1 million a year. Clark can claim the full max as early as 2027. If you blow your remaining cap space in 2026 on expensive role players and those players underperform, you could find yourself in a genuinely difficult salary situation, right at the moment your franchise player needs the most support around her. Being strategic now creates options later. Neither philosophy is objectively wrong. Both have real merit, depending on how you evaluate risk. But the fan base is clearly and loudly aligned with philosophy 1, and it's difficult to argue against them when you look at the current landscape. The Fever are selling out arenas. They're driving television ratings. They're operating from a position of strength that most WNBA franchises will never experience. When you have that kind of leverage, playing it safe feels like leaving real opportunity on the table. There's also an element of this that goes beyond the court. Players notice what front offices do when the spotlight is brightest. They notice whether the organization matches its words about winning with actual resource commitment. If Clark looks at this offseason and sees financial caution where boldness was possible, that conversation doesn't disappear. It surfaces in contract negotiations, in conversations with agents, in decisions about long-term commitment to a franchise. The Fever can't afford to let that seed of doubt take root, because once a generational talent starts questioning whether her organization is truly all in, the relationship between player and franchise shifts in ways that are very hard to reverse. So after everything, the cap math, the Howard departure, the draft picks, the philosophical debate about windows and patience, where does this actually leave the Indiana Fever? Hines-Allen is not the player Natasha Howard was. That comparison isn't even close. Howard was an elite two-way anchor who dominated defensively and produced efficiently on offense. Hines-Allen is a physical veteran who contributes within a system and won't disrupt a locker room. Those are genuinely different things, and pretending otherwise doesn't serve anyone. But the binary of great signing versus terrible signing misses the more honest middle ground. This was the best available move under real constraints, made by a front office that genuinely didn't have the tools to do significantly better. The cap math was always going to produce this kind of offseason. The only question worth asking is whether those constraints were avoidable, and the answer to that is more complicated than any single decision. What Indiana does have heading into 2026 is something genuinely valuable. A fully healthy Caitlin Clark running an offense built entirely around her abilities, surrounded by players who know their roles, trust each other, and have championship experience in the locker room. A fully healthy Clark, no minutes restrictions, no injury caution, complete freedom to operate at full intensity from opening night is a terrifying proposition for any defense in this league. That alone raises the ceiling on what this roster can accomplish by a significant margin. Whether Hines-Allen ends up being a net positive or a liability in the rotation will depend entirely on how well Indiana's coaching staff deploys her. If she's positioned correctly, protected schematically, and used in the specific situations where her physical tools matter most, this signing looks smart in October. If she's exposed in playoff situations against elite offensive players, the questions about what the front office should have done differently get very loud very fast. Championship windows don't announce themselves. Teams look back years later and identify the exact offseason where they should have been bolder, and they carry that regret for a long time. The Fever have the talent. They have the star. They have the attention of the entire sports world right now. The 2026 season will tell us whether the organization is truly committed to maximizing every second of this moment, or whether they looked at an open window and decided to play it safe. The Indiana Fever enter the business and innovation 2026 WNBA season with a roster that's deeper and more experienced than the version that took the court last year, but also with legitimate unanswered questions hanging over them that won't be resolved until the games actually matter. Myisha Hines-Allen may surprise people. Raven Johnson may contribute immediately. Monique Billings may turn out to be the most underrated addition of the entire offseason. All of that is possible, and if it happens, this front office deserves real credit. But possibility isn't the same as certainty, and championship contention demands more than hoping pieces fall into place at exactly the right moment. Caitlin Clark is the best player in women's basketball. She is fully healthy. She is motivated. She is surrounded by players who genuinely believe in what this team is building. That combination is genuinely dangerous for every other team in the league, and it should be enough to carry Indiana deep into the 2026 playoffs. Whether deep into the playoffs is enough, or whether this franchise is capable of delivering the championship moment this fan base has been waiting for, that's the story of the season ahead. And it is absolutely worth watching every single minute of. Stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, with more updates.